Good afternoon, everybody. Good to have you here. I'm gonna give a few more minutes, let folks load in. We've got our amazing panel with us, so I'm thrilled to be able to have them here to be able to talk a little bit about leadership in the nonprofit sector and some of the opportunities and challenges that are going on right now. And so we've got some really good folks, a nice group of people who are participating or joining us here as well. We'll wait just a few more minutes and then we'll get going. And you may have seen or heard as you jump in there that this is recorded, and we do make this stuff available afterwards so that you can share it or take a look at it again, or if you have any of those questions. We don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to go on ahead and get started. It's noon, and so it's noon here in Texas. So to be able to get a chance to be able to just have a conversation, thinking a little bit about leadership, power of collaboration and working with others, and a variety of things that folks are confronting. We've also we're just chatting here before coming in about how it's going now and with the current environment and the shifting priorities that many nonprofits are experiencing, and with funding and all of that. So we'll definitely start with a little conversation on that as well. Briefly, so you've got the information about the center. So this is pleased to be able to offer this as part of the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy, where we're engaged in kind of three portfolios of work around helping and prepare people to make them be successful leaders in the and professionals in the field. Think about strengthening organizations and the capacity of systems and organizations, and then also our work in reference to research, improving scholarship and understanding, and carry out a portfolio of activities there. Couple of upcoming events that I did want to kind of draw your attention to, is we've been working quite a bit on this upcoming webinar on May 13th called Unlocking Systems Thinking, Tools for Transformation. We have about 6 folks that are participating in that. I'm doing that with Kim Bowler, who was a former executive director of the Nicholson Foundation, and we're going to talk about some of the work that the Nicholson Foundation did, as well as an article that Wynn Rosser and I wrote on systems thinking and a systems change model. And so we'd love to have some of you be able to join us on the 13th. And then, of course, we'll be offering our regular leadership and board service on the 29th. All right, enough of the commercials. Let's get to the folks who are here today. So we've got Jennifer Bartowski, who's the CEO of Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas. Roxanne Saldana Jones, President and CEO of the United Ways of Texas, and Kelly Zuniga, who's a nonprofit leader with Kelly Zuniga Consulting. And so with that, I think I'll just go. Jennifer, would you mind just a brief intro so people know who you are and introduce yourself to folks? And I'm going to stop this.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Bartkowski. I am the very proud CEO of Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas. I have 35 years of nonprofit fundraising and leadership experience. Graduated from Texas A&M in 92, and then from A&M with my master's in public administration in 94, which was a little bit too early, but would have been part of the Bush School. I have experience in a number of different nonprofits, including 2 United Way stints, one in Austin and one at United Way of Metropolitan Dallas, and then 16 years currently at Girl Scouts, both in fundraising as COO and now as CEO for the last 11 years. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Roxanne, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Roxanne Jones. I am the president and CEO of United Ways of Texas. We are the statewide association for about 70 United Ways across the state. I might be the outlier. I went to UT. So I'm not quite sure if anybody else did, but
gotta have one.
Gotta have one.
There we
so
go.
Don't hold it against me. But I'm an MBA, so didn't really plan on moving into the nonprofit world, but I ended up here, and I've got a couple of decades of nonprofit leadership experience. So I'm happy to be here with you here today.
Both Jennifer and Roxanne serve on our advisory board as well, so we get their insights on some of that perspective. Kelly, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself to folks?
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here, especially because there are so many Bush School students. might have met some of you in teaching the nonprofit certificate program for over 12 years at Texas A&M Bush School. So it's nice to be here. I kind of represent the other side of the house. I have a consulting firm, Kelly Zuniga Consulting, but I have 34 years in nonprofit experience. And my latest gig was I was CEO of Holocaust Museum Houston for a period of 10 years. So I decided to retire from that position and focus on helping other nonprofits from the standpoint of my personal experience. But it's just great to be here, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Wonderful. Thank you again, everybody. As we said, I think we might just start with Kelly, and I may just start with you, and then we'll work our way down. But sort of, how's it going out there right now? There's a lot going on in this environment. We've got shifting priorities, changes around immigration. We were just talking about some of those issues. Funding, of course, captures a lot of people's attention. There's a lot of stress going on out there. So just from the field and what people are feeling out there, any kind of off the top reflections that you'd kind of like to use to start the conversation, Kelly, if you don't mind, and then
I think there is a lot of fear from the standpoint of the instability in the market, but also for those that have a dependency, a heavy dependency on federal funding. You know, they have to pivot, and so from the perspective of really looking at your funding sources and diversifying those funding sources, that has become a very, very important priority for all nonprofits. So being flexible and looking for additional sources of revenue seems to be a very, very high priority, considering in some cases people are just now finding out that their funding will not be in existence next year.
Yeah, you joined the conversation by saying you knew of a group that had just finished, that laid off about half their workforce, which ended up being about 100 people.
Right, that's a great example.
Jennifer, what are you seeing out there?
I like to say it feels like whiplash on a roller coaster. You know, every day is a new adventure, and it's hard to know what you're going to be facing or what crazy new challenge is going to be put in front of you. We have a lot of headwinds coming at us for sure. I'm kind of, you know, my mantra for 2025 is everything is figure outable. And I actually bought my leadership team little plaques that say everything is figure outable. I don't know how we'll figure it out, but somehow we'll figure it out. But to do that, we're focusing on a couple things. Risk, we have a risk register, and we've got our team really thinking about what are all the risks, how can we mitigate them, how can we be ready for any surprises that come our way. We're also focused in on relationships, particularly during this time. And if you remember the COVID time, what got us through was having really strong relationships with our donors, with our partners. And so that has heightened in its importance. We're talking a lot about our financial forecast, right? It's interesting where our finances are today. What's more interesting is what it looks like they might be tomorrow and 3 years down the road, because the decisions we're making right now are going to have an impact in the future, and we need to be ready for what that impact is. And focus is another thing. I'm starting to have to say no to things, right? You know, whereas before I had space to do a lot of different things, capacity, now I'm having to make choices. I can't do it all. And so we're really putting some rubric and framework into place so that we can say no. The last thing I would say is that we're focusing in a lot on mental health. I serve girls, and our girls are in a mental health crisis. So of course we're doing programming in that space, but my staff are stressed out and have a lot of anxiety, whether it's because ICE may show up at any point or because their capacity to work is minimized or whatever it is. And even my own mental health, I'm having to be thoughtful as a leader of my organization. Every day presents a new set of challenges. How am I setting myself up to be successful in solving for those? So it's a really interesting time. I have said that this is even more challenging, I think, than COVID was. At least during COVID, we all shared in the uncertainty and it all felt somewhat similar. Now we don't even know what's coming at us.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've heard people reference, it feels like we just kind of came out of COVID and now we've entered into this whole other, but it's not the same, because it's impacting different organizations at different points and at different times and in different ways. Some of us are just kind of watching, not knowing exactly what's going on. So
that's right.
Insight. Roxanne, you said you just came from the Hill. I know you're a little closer to the Texas legislature, so I don't know if that's that must influence some of what you see happening as well. So you get a little bit of the Texas flavor in some of this. How's it going? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so we do a lot of policy advocacy work, and so being at the Capitol day in and day out, we're seeing. I will say, been through many sessions, and this is definitely the most interesting. As far as not, there's always that's always interesting, but this is definitely set some new standards as far as what we may or may not expect as we go in each day. So. But with that, I think there is, as nonprofits, we plan for and we talk about lots of different areas from from revenue diversification to how do we engage differently in policy and advocacy? What does that look like? And with all of this, it's really putting a little bit of an exclamation point on why we have to be ready for these things, how we might advocate, and what that looks like differently. And so while it is such a crazy time and we really don't know what's coming at us day in and day out, and we know what bills we have now, right? Because bill filing deadlines passed. And so we know where we are with all of that. We know what we're dealing with, but there's still so many question marks every day when you head into the Capitol. But with all of that, there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity to talk about how we might look at advocacy differently and how important that really is for the nonprofit sector and the public sector in general. So it has brought up a lot of trying to spin it on the positive side of it, brought up a lot of thinking about it in a new and different way. So with all of the craziness, we're just trying to focus on, okay, what can we learn from this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll circle back on advocacy. I think we'll kind of work our way through. We've got a kind of different 4 sets of topics that we said we wanted to try and talk a little bit about. We were thinking about staff and your team, but Jennifer's reference to sort of the health and the coherence of our team and the way we think about shifts there. We do want to talk about advocacy and the way that your organizations are or not engaging in some of that work. We have to talk about money a little bit. And then if we get around to it, we'll get to performance and accountability and just our ability to be able to continue to run programs and offer good services. I know that the audience is going to have questions as well. I'm not going to go there right first. I'm going to kind of just touch on those 4 topic areas for a little bit, and then I hope to be able to leave. My hope will be at least 15 minutes where we can engage questions from folks. So let's see how the first part of the conversation. Jennifer, I do want to circle back. You mentioned this idea of sort of mental health. It's come up in these times, and Kelly referenced as well. It's unknown and it's scary out there in regards to what's happening, and people are anxious about trying to understand, talk just a little bit more about the way you're working with your team and some of the things that you do to try and keep it coherent, keep people healthy, and being able to be present to do the work that needs to get done.
Yeah, I'll come at it from 2 different spaces. First, we are in the midst of a transformational strategic plan, a 4-year transformational strategic plan to reimagine Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas. And that included 4 pillars. And the first pillar was actually to build staff leadership capacity, because a lot of times we've had strategic plans, we went out to deliver on them, we didn't execute the way we wanted to. And what I observed was that time after time after time, we invested in all the things except our people. And so our people were showing up the same way every time we tried to execute. And of course they did, because we'd never tried to change their mindset or the way they showed up. And so we've spent the last 2.5 years investing in our people in cultural competency training, in leadership development. We've achieved pay equity. We've done an organizational redesign to make us more efficient, more effective. And we've spent a lot of time investing in mental health programming. So we start every meeting with a mindful moment. We have programming for our girls that actually we will do for our staff. And we have a mental health day, and we talk a lot about mental health amongst our staff. For my direct reports, I think, my C-suite, who are managing a lot of these big existential risks and challenges, it's really important for me to not micromanage them, but to actually trust them. I have a very long tenured leadership team. I have heard it's the longest tenured leadership team in the Girl Scout movement. They've been with me for over 10 years, every one of them except I've had just one good turnover that started in the last year. And we spend a lot of time together just talking about trust, talking about each other, our lives, and trying to make space for us to be able to show up with whatever baggage or emotions that we're carrying with us that day. And I think in this kind of environment of uncertainty, an environment of there are no easy answers, we have to show up, we have to recognize that we're showing up with our whole selves. And if we feel authentically that we can, if we can bring our vulnerabilities, then we're going to be able to be honest and truthful and really stronger for it. So I'm trying to make a space in our culture and in our environment that allows for that as much as possible. I will also say I continue to allow for hybrid work. We are in the office 3 days a week. Our staff really value and appreciate the idea that they can work from home when needed. As a chief fundraiser and chief storyteller, I rarely get to work from home. I'm always out in the community, and I have staff in camps and at schools that don't get to do it either. But for those who do, I know it adds a level of mental health and wellness that they really value and appreciate.
Nice. Thank you. Kelly, did you insights or thoughts about team building and how you, I know you don't have a team right now, but you
Yeah.
should over the time.
Well, I have teams of clients, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Jennifer, that was so well spoken from the perspective of what are the main problems out there? What do you have to focus on? And I wanted to add on the very, very much important component of values and emphasizing the values of the institutions. And if you look at the definition of values, it really is relative importance of the priorities and beliefs in one's life, okay? So they are working at your nonprofit because those values should match. That is a happy employee if they are working someplace that they're passionate about. The values, their personal values, match that nonprofit's effort. And so what I want to emphasize is the fact that if you ignore those values, you really do it at your own peril. So making sure that there is clarity associated with the values of the organization and then how you operate as a leader, as a manager, you are demonstrating those values on a daily basis in your work. And I think that is why all those great things that Jennifer is doing, they really wrap around the Girl Scout mission, the ability to build and to have training in your work. So invest in your employees, invest in their training, in counseling, in mental health. All of those things, really make a difference for an employee because then they feel valued, which is just so, so very important. But I also wanted to talk about clarity, clarity of timing, clarity of expectations, clarity of, again, the values and how you're going to achieve those strategic plan and imperatives. So as a leader, it's funny because you don't really hear about this that much, but the importance of communicating every single day, one aspect. If you could write on a sheet of paper and keep it by your desk and say, okay, on Monday, I'm going to reemphasize the goal. On Tuesday, I'd like to reemphasize the importance of mental health. So just to remind you, because we get so busy in all of the minutia and meeting people and advocacy and everything that's part of your job, but overreaching, communicating those basic messages of what's important to your institution, I just can't underestimate, emphasize that. So those are just a couple points.
Nice.
Kelly, I would add to that before COVID, they used to say you have to hear everything 7 times before it sinks in. Post-COVID, they're saying 11 times minimum. So you have to just keep saying things again, and again.
Roxanne?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly agree with everyone, especially what was brought up around, pay equity. We are constantly working to advocate and work with community partners across the state. As a statewide organization, we serve, like I said, 70 United Ways that support 254 counties, right? And one of the things that we're constantly working towards is living wages and making sure that individuals have the support that they need, that those families that are living paycheck to paycheck, et cetera. And we have to be sure that we are looking to our organizations to do the same. So making sure that there's pay equity involved. As was already mentioned, room for mental health, opening each meeting with just space, staff meetings with space for people to share how they're feeling, this environment that we're in, how is it affecting them? What does that look like? And being able to listen and value those diverse perspectives has been really helpful for our team, has been really helpful for other organizations that we work with. And I'd also say reaffirming how their individual positions tie to the overall strategies of the organization. It's a little bit of echoing, tying to values, but it also, also taking it even maybe a step further in, so they can see exactly how, no matter where they are within the organization, they can see where their work ties specifically to strategies for the organization. That's really helpful so that if they are an administrative individual or if they're part of a C-suite, they can see how their work is really supporting the overall organization, and that everybody is essential to the advancement of the overall mission and vision of the organization. And then lastly, just that feedback loop, man, just having that constant feedback loop is probably more important than ever, considering the current environment, considering, post-COVID, considering the stress that is in the expectations that are put on nonprofit organizations in every single community, the expectation that is set for nonprofit organizations and how you're going to fill these gaps in these communities, and allowing a feedback loop for every position, every individual, so that there's just that constant communication and that constant open channel to encourage that feedback loop, and to have those regular check-ins to be sure that people are on the right path. They see their focus, they see how they tie in. I feel it's just been a really strong strategy in making sure that you have a strong, cohesive team overall.
That's good. Go ahead, Kelly. Did you?
I just wanted to add, and I really liked the fact that, how you talked about the recurrence of communication. And one of the things that we utilize at the museum that I found very effective is that every individual that worked there had their own business plan. So there was clarity as far as their expectations for the goals that have been set, their operations, and so forth. But then we used key performance indicators. So we did utilize KPIs and really presented those at every workspace, so that it was perfectly clear to anybody walking up to someone sitting at a desk area, they knew what their 3 key performance indicators were that they were working on. And then we would talk about those and the success associated with where they were in their department meetings, and then change it and modify it and so forth. So that really is more just a communication tool, and it makes people coalesce around those, and then ultimately bubbles up to the ultimate strategic goal and achieving that goal. So small parts at the beginning, but then bring it into the whole.
Right, and bringing it all the way down so that each person could talk about the way that they fit into the goal and what they were trying to do and what were some of those measures. Nice. We'll switch just a little bit to questions around succession. I mean, we talk about building the team, but also this realization that people do come and go, and especially executive leaders. We saw there during COVID where people kind of made their way through, and then we saw a pretty significant shift. I mean, I think Kelly made reference to it's almost a time when a season of particular executives are thinking of rotating out. Jennifer, what are you thinking about in regards to succession planning?
Yeah, it is interesting. I know we have quite a lot of executive C-suite retirement happening within our movement right now, and I'm seeing it in other nonprofits. It reminds me a little bit of COVID, where people kind of got into that and went, now's a good time for me to retire. I thought I might make it another year or two, but this isn't. I just don't want to do this anymore. And it feels kind of like people are getting to that point here now. A little bit about how we're looking at succession planning. I was the succession plan 11 years ago when my CEO resigned, and my board called a special meeting. I did a quick presentation, and they didn't do a search. I became the CEO. they were very spoiled that it was set up that way. And I don't think every organization has that, singular person standing in the wings ready to just swoop into the CEO spot. So, I don't necessarily have that, although I have a fantastic C-suite. Each of them is an expert in what they do. And I have been spending the last few years building out the things that they are not expert in so that they can come most well-rounded into a CEO's position, should it be the position that I hold, or if they want to move on and go to a different CEO position at another organization. But we do have a pretty substantial document that communicates to the board exactly what they need to do. Should I resign or should I abruptly leave or whatever might happen? But what I recommended to my board is not only should they look internally into the organization, but externally as well, for a couple of reasons. One is I've been the CEO for 11 years and I was the succession plan for somebody who was the CEO for 7 years. So you've had a fairly similar vision for 18 years in our organization. It might be time to bring in an outside perspective. And that's something that from a big business lens that I think that the board should consider. But I also think that it's, given what we're going through in our communities and our world with the letters D, E, and I still think it's always a good idea to take a look at bringing some diversity to the top of the organization, to bring, racial and ethnic diversity. Our girls, 20,000 Girl Scouts that we serve in Northeast Texas, is good for them to see someone who looks like them in leadership role. And also their lived experiences and different perspectives on how the world works could bring a new mindset and perspective to the role. So I have told my board again and again, because they spend a lot of time in a sense of anxiety that I'm going to leave them, that should I leave, they should look internally. There are some people who I think would be qualified or perhaps close to ready. But I also think that they should look externally because I think there's value in that as well.
Kelly, did you want to provide some insights around succession and what you're seeing? And
First of all, I'm very impressed with Jennifer that her
Yeah.
group has a plan. Congratulations. That's actually a rarity, very much so. When you're looking at a larger institutions, they have the resources, it's a little bit different. But I'm going to focus on the smaller organizations, the ones that are from, 2 million to 7 million. It's not very common that they have, a succession plan. And so my recommendation on that is that becomes a board activity. And you create a task force membership associated with the board to actually do that, create a plan that could probably take them almost a year to put that together for 2 scenarios. And that would be someone leaving immediately, but also someone that is a planned, trained internal individual that might be the replacement for the outgoing CEO. So I think the underlying emphasis is planning, very, very important, because it's going to benefit the organization, but also the document coming from the board really truly reflects what the institution, how they view themselves now and where they want to be in another 10 years. So.
Roxanne, I know you've had some experiences with succession planning. I was thinking about sort of your personal experiences there too. Any insights or thoughts on that you want to touch on?
Sure, yeah, and Kelly, you took the words right out of mouth. I'm like, give it to the board. Especially like you said, the majority of nonprofits in the state are not, don't have multi-million-dollar budgets, don't have 50+ staff. The majority are smaller organizations, and that is something that, while it is such a critical, essential item, it is something that, let's be honest, it usually falls to the bottom of the list until it's absolutely necessary, right? So by encouraging the board to take that on, I think that's a great recommendation, Kelly. And then just, I'm a big believer in internal talent and leadership growth and in developing that leadership pipeline, even within a small organization. Even if you have less than 10 staff, there's opportunities to, again, going back to that open communication feedback loop, understanding which each individual employee, what are their goals? Where do they want to be? Do they see themselves as a future nonprofit leader from a CEO level? What does that look like? So addressing what your internal talent is and what their goals are, and then seeing, is there a fit there? So you can see, is there an opportunity for that leadership pipeline to grow within the organization? And of course, absolutely agree that, there's certainly always a great idea to look in the organization and out of the organization. But very often, tying back to the conversation earlier, when you have staff on board that really tie to the values, they really believe in the mission or the organization. A lot of times you can look to your even a small staff and find somebody that'd be a really great individual. And then you can begin to grow that talent, identify what those critical roles are. They can build up to that. And so there's a real long-term plan in place for that growth.
You know, we're hearing planning, and we're hearing building and growing your people are two key themes. Roxanne, I'm going to stay with you and let you answer the next question on advocacy, and sort of think about the role of advocacy in advancing a nonprofit's mission, and how leaders can engage in advocacy, right? It can make people nervous. It can make people fundraising and advocacy potentially are areas where people might be a little uncomfortable. But talk a little bit about advocacy and the way you see that as a responsibility of a nonprofit leader.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I like the fact that you put the words fundraising and advocacy together in the same sentence, because so many individuals don't see that advocacy can actually be a great resource development tool. I wish every nonprofit would dive into policy and advocacy on some level, whether that's at a very small, low-hanging fruit local level, or whether that's being involved with a statewide partner or whatever that looks like. But I hope everybody on this call knows that every nonprofit can advocate on behalf of initiative areas that they want to focus on. Whether you do policy or not might be a different question, but everybody can advocate. And really the only difference there is that if you are talking about, and I don't mean for this to become a class on the difference between advocacy and policy, but I'll just throw it out there really quickly. If you're talking about a specific piece of legislation, you're referencing a specific bill number, you've moved into actual public policy. If you are talking about issues, what's important to your organization, whether that's food banks and health and nutrition, whether that's mental health, whether that's financial stability, if you're talking about initiatives in general, what's happening in your community, you are advocating for an issue. And everybody on this call would be able to do that if you're working for a nonprofit. So I encourage you to identify partners that are in this area already, there's somebody, I guarantee you, there's an organization in this state that is already working in this issue area to where it become a very easy lift for you to just stay on top of it, be involved, you be the expert in your community. As a policy advocacy organization, we are following, I can't even tell you how many bills. We wrap it all up. We give this information over. Our United Ways or our partners will slap their logo on it. They are the expert in their community. And I guarantee you there's an organization that's doing just that. You just have to find your issue area. And if you need help with that, please feel free to reach out to me. But there's so much work that can happen, real systemic change that can happen at an advocacy policy level, especially at the local level. And so many organizations do not get involved because there was this misconception way back when that nonprofits cannot advocate or nonprofits cannot be involved in public policy. So many shy away from it. But real long-term systemic change truly happens at an advocacy/policy level. And it is the easiest at the local level, local government, local city, county. So much easier to make change happen than it is at the Capitol down the road for me right now. So highly encourage it. If you're at the beginning stages, I guarantee you there's a billion trainings that I can help you get involved with, and there's an organization to support you. So really encourage you to use it as a long-term systemic change, as a point of strategy, and also as a resource development tool. I'm sorry, Will, I'll stop talking. Just real quick, as a resource development tool, advocacy can really, it's something, especially now when we can talk about this in a second, when we talk about resource development, we talk about fundraising, people like the shiny new stuff, right? That's what captures people. It engages people these days. I mean, we're competing with all of the GoFundMes and people's phones and et cetera, right? Policy is shiny and fancy. People love to get involved. They like the data. They like to be in the know on that. And so it can really be a great way to engage new board members, to engage new donors, if they can get involved in this sort of thing, or if your organization becomes the expert in your community, the quote unquote expert, because you've got somebody that you're working with that's feeding you all of this. So it can be a really great way to engage new donors, to engage new partners and to use it as a long-term fundraising and resource development tool to help diversify what that funding looks like. Okay, I could talk all day on that, so I'll just.
Yeah, no, thank you, Roxanne. That's good stuff. Kelly or Jennifer, you want to, anything you want to add or respond to in regards to that?
Example, and when I was CEO at Holocaust Museum Houston, there are 9 institutions that were Holocaust museums throughout the United States. We had never met together. And so a gentleman in New York brought us all together, and we started meeting every quarter and then in person once a year. And we became quite a strong advocacy group by ourselves, and we learned so much from all the various states as far as their strategies of how they got educational funding to come to their various museums, or just writing legislation that might be attractive in your particular state. So the grouping together with your peers can be educational, but also very powerful, because you can go in together and really support a particular issue, put it in the paper, write letters, have an impact. And, you know, instead of being just one person in your specialty and locally, you can have a lot more punch on a national level like that. So I encourage all of you to really collaborate with your peers, no matter where they are, and create an advocacy group, somebody that you can work together on really looking at the various issues.
Can I add that to that really quickly, Will? Because Kelly, I think that's a great point. Because you, in your individual community, you are the expert. So your local legislator, they need you, and they need the information you have and the data that you have to be able to do their job. You are their constituent. You have the data. You know the pulse. You have the pulse of your community. They don't necessarily. They might be here in Austin while you're there day to day, and you have the pulse of the community. So that's another opportunity for you to create that relationship with your local legislator. So when it's time for them to know, like, hey, how many people are, you know, what are the top calls coming in for 211 in your community? You can get that data. You become that point person for them. That creates a relationship. So when it's time for you to call them and say, hey, we really need to draw down dollars for XYZ, whatever that is, you've got that going on. So I think Kelly's got a great point. Coming together, having those relationships is just another really essential tool. And you are the expert, and we shouldn't forget that.
Terrific idea.
I think that adds to your credibility as an organization. But on the flip side, what I would say that's happening right here in this moment in the state of Texas and across the United States is that there are bills being considered in the legislatures that can have adverse impacts on all of us. And so that's another thing to be mindful of. I know in this environment, gender is a part of the DEI conversation, and there's a Senate bill in the House or Senate bill in the state of Texas right now that would impact my ability to access schools. So we are, you know, working with our fellow councils to make sure that that isn't necessarily I don't think it is necessarily what those legislators were hoping to do. And so we have to protect ourselves and our girls so that we can continue to provide services. So being just really mindful about what's happening in the world right now is also just really important.
How do you track stuff like that, Jennifer, to be able to know when something is happening? Because there's a lot that happens, and it can be tricky to know when some of that stuff's coming through.
I am not the expert in that. Our national organization has someone who pays attention to that, but actually this came through the grapevine. We had a board member who at another council who made the CEO aware, who then made us aware. So I could certainly do a better job of paying attention to that. But
I think the idea that it comes through the grapevine or comes through with different sources of information is probably real, or what happens for a lot of, because I mean, if you're busy operating an organization that, you know, outside of the network necessarily, or that's not a priority to track that stuff. It becomes you need the allies, right? You need folks like what Roxanne's doing there for the United Ways. You need folks like that who are tracking some of that material.
That's right. And it's a good role for your board too, and reminding your board of their governance role to be sort of paying attention to what's going on in the world. So it helps you. It's a risk.
We'll touch on fundraising a little bit, and then I'll open it up for questions. So we had two that we sort of had talked about. One was sort of this idea of, is there anything innovative or something different that's happening in the fundraising space? So maybe we'll start with that one. If anybody's got anything that they see happening kind of different or in fundraising, or maybe it comes back to the fundamentals again. Jennifer, you're on, so why don't you go on ahead and react to that?
I have a very boring answer to this question, and that is I do think it goes back to fundraising 101. It is right now, it is all about relationships and touch points and stewardship and communication. I think you have to go back to that and ensure that the donors that you have are close to you, that they understand what the state of the organization is right now and what the importance they are to you. I consider myself chief storyteller, and so I spend a lot of time. The vast majority of my time is spent, if you will, fundraising, and that takes many shapes. But I spend a lot of time with donors, telling them what's going on in the world today, how our strategy is impacted, why that's important, why their engagement with us is so important. And I think, this is a world right now where people are looking for a place to belong, a community. People are very isolated post-COVID, and so where you can make your donors feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, where they're part of something that's fighting for the greater good. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I would go back to just, fundraising 101. I've been doing this for 35 years. People want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be appreciated.
Roxanne or Kelly, what are some of your thoughts to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. 100% agree. Relationships are key, and I think we see that even just in our all of us are, I'm sure, on some form of social media, right? You've got things coming at you right and left and every other which way, right? And the ones that we focus on are the ones that we have a connection to, right? Whether that's something that connects to us personally, or we've got that built-in relationship. So I 100% agree with that and echo that for sure. I think we also, and hopefully nobody turns off the camera when I start saying this, but remind you, and I come in here from an MBA lens, and I wasn't supposed to join this nonprofit world, but I did. So a lot of the things that I see, it's coming through this business lens. We as nonprofits cannot be afraid to, for lack of a better term, to productize what we do, right? We are initially selling something. And we are so afraid to talk about it in this way sometimes that we do ourselves a disservice. So whatever the work that we are doing, it is essentially something that it is a product that we are giving to the community in whatever way that looks like. Whether it's feeding families through a food bank, whether it's helping seniors get their medicine, whatever it is, we are selling some type of product. And once we kind of start thinking about it in that way, we begin to think about the messaging in a different way, because we began to talk about it, and we began talking about it in a different way, and talking about it in a way, in that sort of way. It doesn't detract from anything that we're doing. It's the same mission, same vision. We're still doing all the same work. We're just shifting the way we talk about it so that it becomes something that's a little more tangible that people can engage with and connect to. So it's not this hypothetical idea of us solving the world's problems. It's this real thing that we're doing day to day, in and out. And so we've seen a lot of success with different organizations that, again, for lack of a better term, and you can pick whatever term you want, that are thinking about their work in a kind of a product-driven way and talking about that work in a way to where we're engaging people into that specific item, and not so much this idea or this theory that we're going to meet this mission or this vision, which is all very important, but we're talking about it in a real essential, tangible way, and it connects with people, I think, a little more easily. So anyhow.
Yeah, I think the other language I think I use around some of that is the value proposition, right? Is how do we talk about the value of the work that we do in relation to things that are important? I saw the comment just come through on about the impact, talking about the impact of the value proposition, of what it means. I think, because I can remember conversations, probably been a little while, but I suspect in just to use the word marketing would throw somebody off in the nonprofit sector, and how uncomfortable they might be with thinking about that we're trying to market something or communicate that. But there is something about the society and the way we think about communicating our value proposition that it's an interesting sort of productizing in some ways interesting reaction or phrase. Kelly, what are you thinking about?
Well,
some
I'm
of
always
that?
thinking about the small guy. So let's go back to the $2 to $7 million people as far as their overall budget. And that is never, never, never forget the plan giving donor. And so remember I believe it's up to 3 trillion in financial assets that will be transferring to the next generation, and that's currently happening. You can be a part of that and incorporate everything that my colleagues here have talked about, the importance of building those relationships over a long period of time. So just have a legacy program and start talking about it and start building those relationships with people that are on average 60 plus, because once they make a legacy gift, they've committed to you and they want to know more about you and develop that relationship over a longer period of time. So guess what you're going to do? You're going to initiate an endowment fund, or it might be the reverse. They initiate an endowment account and then it's funded through their legacy planning later on in life. But people like to see what they're impacting. They like to see that impact. And so it's really, really a great entree for you to develop with a donor to get them to be recognized in a legacy program and then say, you know, you made this great gift. Would you like to put it in perpetuity and actually see it in action while you're alive? So let's start funding your annual fund towards an endowment, and then have your legacy gift support that endowment upon your death. That's exciting to people. They see the difference, they see their impact, and it's a game changer with your organization, building endowment, which is so, so important. So don't forget that. That category of giving should never be ignored.
Even for the small guys, right? To be able to think about.
That's why I'm
plan giving.
saying, even for the small guys, right?
Questions from the group here. That's we've given you quite a bit. We've got plenty of more questions, so don't worry about that. But I thought maybe at this point it might make sense to open up. I'm not tracking great on the chat. I don't know if anything's come through there, so you can either raise your hand or put something in the chat if you want, if you have something. But I'd love to hear it. Okay, we just got a hand. Angela, go on ahead.
I'm just enjoying this session. This is my first session. And
Welcome.
yes, I live here in Bryan and College Station, Texas. Miss Shay from the small business gave me this information, and I'm thanking God that I've reached out. I also am a nonprofit organization, and I'm just enjoying what all of y'all saying. Is just like, oh, the antennas. And my organization, what we do is basically we support former inmates upon being released and also in prison. I'm thanking God that I am one of them, and I get to go inside the front door to show them it can be possible, it can be done. And I'm just thankful to be in the room with you.
Oh, wonderful. Good to have you, Angela. I appreciate you joining us today. Other questions you'd like to ask of the panelists or reactions to small, as it sounds like Angela's got herself a bit of a startup there too as well, and getting going.
Yes, I have wonderful, great ideas and to assist former inmates, justice impact individuals. Like getting out of prison, they come out with nothing but what they have on their back. And the reason why I know, just like I just explained, I was one of them.
Yeah, it's good work. And you're just getting going at it, right? Fairly new at it, or?
Well, I've been out of prison for over 20 years.
Right.
Thank God I turned and I turned for the greater good.
Good for you.
And it has always been weighing on my heart to do something. And I love advocacy. Thank you, Miss Roxanne, because definitely that's what I do. I'm definitely a speaker. author, and I explain that in my book, that things that I experienced through somebody else's identity, and now I'm walking in what I am supposed to do, how I'm supposed to live the right way, you know. And yes, and thank you also, Miss Jennifer, when you talk about mental health. Definitely went through that. Definitely. And helping other people that's getting out of prison is difficult. And I'm like, I want to give care bags. I want to give them this. I want to give them that. And then I'm like, Angie, where your money come from? I'm like, oh.
Right.
But Goodwill has supported me. They did partnership with me, and I'm the Heart of Texas Goodwill, and they gave me Goodwill $20 bucks, and I can give that. Now I have something tangible instead of just saying it. Now I can be about it. But yes, funding is one of the hardest thing. I've been active since July, but it's always been here and here, and now I'm walking.
Maybe I'll ask the panelists, what advice do you have for a young startup nonprofit like that? Or is it a heart, a passion for the work, given of everything you've got in some ways? Who wants to go ahead?
Angela, I
Yeah,
really respect the work that you're doing, and I would focus on your board. That would be the first thing. You didn't mention if you had a board, but if you have, then the more diverse, the better. People that are passionate about your mission. And of course, you realize that funding, a lot of your funding is going to originate from your board members. So making sure that they have job descriptions and they know what is expected of them from the standpoint of their contributions on an annual basis, and then build on those relationships within your board members. You want people that are introducing you to corporate players, people within your community that really believe in the work you're doing.
Yeah, I have been the board chair of two founding nonprofit organizations, two organizations that have been startups, Carson's Village and Black Women in Nonprofit Leadership. And both had their own challenges. And unfortunately, in this environment, the Black Women in Nonprofit Leadership Program has just closed because we couldn't keep it afloat. But what I would say is, obviously Kelly is right. The board is critical, and having a board that can speak on your behalf, introduce you to circles that you're not already in, that can advocate for you and bring resources to the table. And I have to stress, this is true for a startup or not a startup. When you recruited board of directors, be very clear on what your expectations are. You don't want a board member to join your board and be surprised that they are a fundraiser too. You want them to be very clear on the front end that these are the things that you're expecting of them, and they will be measured by those accomplishments. I'd also say, Angela, that you're doing work that's hard, very hard. And so make sure you're taking care of your own mental health first, mental and physical health, because the folks that you're serving need your support. I think it's, if you're going to invest in any kind of resource, investing in a grant writer is sometimes a good start, because I know sometimes that is something that is not a natural skill for a startup CEO, and bringing somebody in who has some experience telling stories and crafting a story, packaging a story, thinking about outcomes and outputs. Those are all helpful skills in so many different ways, in the way that you tell the story out in public, the way you write grants, the way you get funding, that kind of thing. So good luck to you. I hope that you are successful.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I do have a board, and they are wonderful. And I was very making sure I choose the right that's going to be with no hands down, and but hands that's lifted up. And I'm definitely thankful for them, just to support what I believe in. So thank you.
Yeah, and Tasha, one of our instructors, acknowledges 2 life stages, right? Things happen in phases. It happens in time, right? So you do a bit now at what it means to be at the early stage and what it means and what you can accomplish there. I think that's a really good insight. We did have a question on that came through the chat, was a little bit about, so for your smaller organizations, maybe even a little bit like Angela's group there, And how do you think about succession planning in a real small group like that, where it's still, the founder's still around? Jennifer, you just made reference to some organization, they made reference to, if the ED quits or can't keep doing it, that's the end. It's over, the group is gone. And so any thoughts about how to be able to keep moving forward ideas, and after maybe a founding executive or a small executive has to leave a group?
I'm not sure I have a great answer, but here's what I would say is that, so for instance, I'm a board chair, or I have been board chair of Carson's Village, which has been around for about 8 years, $250,000 budget, serving families after the death of a loved one. And the executive director is passionate about the cause, and should he walk away, I'd say there's probably a pretty good chance that organization would not continue well, even though he does have a COO in place. Perhaps that person would step into that role. But I think when you think about stages and life stages of a nonprofit organization, there's a period where you're super scrappy and you're just trying to survive. And it's hard to think about succession planning during that time. But then you kind of ease over that line to where you're like, okay, I can breathe. And that may be the time where you're looking at your board and your staff, and even volunteers as to, kind of who might be able to take on that effort. And also, founding a nonprofit organization, especially when you're not paid for a very long time, is exhausting. So thinking that you can do it forever is probably not sustainable. But that it is certainly much harder. I'm a $20 million nonprofit, so I have a different set of challenges. I think when you're a startup nonprofit, a lot of the passion and energy and sustainability lives with that person who is the face of the organization.
Can add to that real quickly, that then just that, succession planning doesn't stop just at the staff. That includes the board as well. Particularly for those that are, 1-person, 2-person shops, making sure that the board realizes they could be part of that succession plan, and knowing what the critical roles are of the organization, having that roadmap laid out so that they understand that these are the things that have to absolutely happen while they are waiting to fill that CEO or executive director position. So knowing that, again, kind of back to the point that Jennifer made, if that might be an expectation of the board, is being part of literally being part of the succession plan, and that they might have to step in should there be a gap in leadership, that they would be aware of that. So making sure that a very small shop might include that board literally in that succession plan.
Jennifer, I saw you responded there to Savannah on the chat. Anything else you want to add? Savannah was asking, as a first-year student here at Texas A&M University, thinking about finance or marketing degrees, and kind of how that might fit into the sector. I don't know, Savannah, if you wanted to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I've kind of been, and it's really cool to get to hear you guys all talk about your work and like different sizes of companies. But right now I'm a Mays business freshman and deciding between a marketing degree or a finance degree. And that is a really hard decision, and because they're very different. But I was wondering what y'all's input is on which major would maybe benefit me more in a nonprofit or just in general.
You're after my own heart. I have to speak up first because I was a finance major and I loved investments. And so I majored in finance, and I worked in the securities industry for 10 years before I entered nonprofit.
Wow.
And not a day goes by that I don't use the skill sets that I, learned as far as working in the securities field. And many people can't read a balance sheet. You'll find out when you work with nonprofits. So that financial literacy is extremely important and highly valued in the field.
I'll give you my own journey quickly. I was an English political science. Well, I was a business major at A&M to start. I did not do terribly well in accounting or in economics. And so I changed to an English political science major, and I graduated with that and went on and got my master's in public administration with a nonprofit management specialty. One regret I have is that I didn't focus more on finance space, because so much of what you're doing especially as a C-suite or a CEO, is figuring out how you fund this stuff and how you resource this stuff and how you get creative in financial forecasting and that kind of stuff. So I highlight, whenever I mentor a young nonprofit person, I always recommend that they do some kind of financial education. But that said, I also think that my English, political science, liberal arts, critical thinking degree played a big part in my success. I'm a storyteller. I am a marketer. I can communicate very well. I'm a very good visionary and strategist. And those things came from my liberal arts major. And probably I was born with some of that as well. I think that's kind of my wheelhouse. So I think having both is really healthy. I think a very successful CEO, very successful leader is going to have a little bit of specialty and sort of a broad range of things that can make you good at leading a team of people.
There you
I'll
go.
echo the finance.
Finance,
Just real
you're going
quick, Will,
finance?
because I'll echo finance, and mainly because as a there's no other organization that has to be more transparent from a financial perspective, I think, than a nonprofit organization. The expectation there for transparency is it's just very, very high. And so, especially if you're wanting to move into a leadership position within a nonprofit, understanding the financials, being able to read them and be able to ask, luckily you have a CFO and you're not running all the ships, but to be able to read those and to question your CFOs, to ask those questions, to have that back and forth would be crucial in a leadership position within a nonprofit.
And
Yeah,
one more point I have, Will, is
Yeah.
that never to stop learning. So you have your finance degree, get your MBA, go on for your advanced degrees. One of the first things I always talk to every staff member is, okay, you have this degree, what are you working on next? What is your certificate? What is your validation of being an expert in your area? So you never stop learning. So I want to encourage everybody for that perspective, is that just keep going, because it's going to just add value from your perspective, but also your marketability and your skill set.
Thank you. Thank you, Savannah. Thank you to our panelists. I'm thrilled that, as I was afraid, the hour would go really quickly. So it was a wonderful conversation. Your insights and your perspectives are very much valued. I'm sure, I'm assuming that most folks, would be open to, if somebody wanted to reach out directly, they can contact you. And okay, wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Hope you enjoyed the session. And look forward. I guess we probably won't be back until next fall. I guess, Kenny Taylor, do you know when our next webinar? Well, this is the last one for the spring, so I guess we're done for now.
This is the last one for the spring. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate all the comments. Really good. Hearing about the personal leadership development, something that certainly stuck with me. The other thing, I know we can't get to it in terms of responding, but making the decision to invest in professional development is tough, right? So we look at what happened with COVID. Everybody just work. And hearing some of you all say, make sure to invest in your employees. That's a tough dynamic right now as nonprofit organizations are losing funds. So finding innovative and creative ways to invest in that, that's something that stuck with me, that, everyone should be thinking about how to do that, even though we're all working on these very thin margins one way or the other at nonprofit organizations. So think creatively and find ways to prioritize that was something that stuck with me when I heard our speakers mention that today.
Thank you, everybody.